There are good people on both sides of the aisle trying to do the right thing. And these are tough times, and we often, think politics just in terms of national politics. But boy, this COVID period has been tough on school board members, members of the city council, or mayors, or county commissioners, or others that are trying to do the right thing, given the information they have, and usually get just grief. And so that's the one thing I try to make a point of doing. When somebody is doing things that uplift the debate or try to uplift the tone, to shoot them a note. Or to the extent you use social media, use it in ways that uplifts people. And podcasts like this, I think, do that.
This is Jeff Burningham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where we talk to people, everyday people, some that you've heard of, some that you haven't, about life, and we learn about them. Let me remind you of the tenets of the podcast before we get started with our great guests today, the Flakes, Jeff and Cheryl Flake. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Let me remind you, number one, no matter our differences, and we're all different. You guys know that. I know that. But we always have more commonality to build on. You guys have lived around the world. You've done amazing things. I want to hear about that. We always have more in common than we do differently. Number two, because of that, let's exercise some more compassion. Less comparison, less competing, more compassion for each other. And then third, too often we let mistakes of the past or fear for an unknown future cloud our judgment. We make bad decisions. Let's act in faith. Let's go forward in faith. And I think that the Flakes here in front of me, Jeff and Cheryl, are great examples of these things. So I'm grateful to have you guys on the podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I got to know Jeff a little bit while I was running for governor. I think we met backstage at Silicon Slopes.
That's right.
If you remember that.
That's right, I do.
I met you two there, Cheryl. And really recently, post the governor run and post Jeff being in the Senate, we've struck up a friendly rivalry on the tennis courts. And that's really where I've gotten to know the real Senator Flake, right there on the tennis courts.
Well, more Cheryl Flake. She's the one that told me of your prowess on the court.
You guys would play in the court next to us.
Yeah, Cheryl, it was great to see you there. It was super fun. I love tennis. I just learned to play a couple of years ago, and it's so fun. I love playing.
You're a quick learner.
Yeah, he is.
Well, Jeff's a good player. I haven't played against you, Cheryl, but Jeff's here. I learned something about Jeff playing tennis. You are such a mild-mannered, nice guy. Agreed? Like, that's just how you... But you're kind of a killer on the tennis court, Jeff. Like, your competitive streak comes out, does it not?
I'll admit it, yeah.
Have you always been competitive like that, like in athletics or whatever?
Yeah. With athletics, certainly. I grew up in a small town, and you had to play everything because they needed, people to fill the bench.
Yeah.
I think it comes out.
Yeah, it sure does. I love playing with you. It's fun to see you just at the net smashing people. He loves at the net.
Usually into the net. There's a problem.
Well, once in a while. Well, most of you all know, but, Jeff was a member of the House of Representatives from the state of Arizona from 2001 to 13.
That's correct.
And then a member of the Senate from 2013 to 19. He and Cheryl are the proud parents of 5 beautiful children.
Right.
And Cheryl's a famous chef. She told me not to say that, and I don't know if she is. She says she's not. Jeff said he made breakfast this morning.
I did. That's just to give her a break.
But Cheryl loves cooking, and we're going to have a great conversation today. Let me dive in, if I could, with this, if it's okay. Jeff, would you consider yourself a career politician? I'm curious. That term goes around. Would you consider yourself that? You've obviously done some things before getting into elected office. We could talk about that. But would you consider yourself that? And how do you feel about that term? I'm curious your thoughts on it.
No, I don't think I would qualify. Had I stayed in the Senate, maybe. I did 18 years in elected office, but I had a good career before that time, and hopefully a career after that.
Yeah.
But I don't hold the same kind of negative connotation that some have of career politicians. There are some who have been in Washington a long time, or at state level politics a long time, or local politics, and and they have institutional knowledge that we lose when they leave.
Yeah.
Increasingly today, too, with politics kind of as it is, you value that institutional knowledge. We were better off because people in the Senate had been there when the Senate worked, for example.
Yeah, and they knew how it actually
exactly,
worked. Yeah.
And how to legislate and how to compromise and how to negotiate. And a lot of that is lost. So obviously there are some people who overstay their welcome and stay there a little too long. But there are some, like I served with John McCain. I was usually called the other senator from Arizona.
That's right. The lesser known senator, maybe, yeah.
And he was there for more than 30 years in the House and Senate. And I was glad for every minute he was there because he brought a lot of gravitas to the job, but also institutional knowledge and, kind of throwback to the old politics.
Yeah. Did you enjoy Senator McCain? I'm assuming you guys had a good relationship and friendship. Yeah. Like, tell us about Senator McCain. We all know of him, but don't really know him, right? Like, what sticks out to you about Senator McCain?
I was in the House for 12 years, and he was in the Senate the whole time. I should say before that, we did an internship in Washington. Cheryl and I went just after college, packed our bags, and very naively, I just moved to D.C. with one unpaid internship between us. And we, had we been, smarter, less naive, we would never have risked that. Yeah. I'm glad we did. Yeah. But I got there, and I was going to do an internship with one of my senators. That was John McCain or Dennis DeConcini. John McCain, a Republican like me, Dennis DeConcini, the Democrat. DeConcini was doing a little more foreign policy than John McCain was at that time. And I thought, it's good enough for me. I'll go with Dennis. Yeah. And I did. And, I love John McCain, but I'm glad I interned for Dennis DeConcini. It gave me, a better perspective, I think, on Capitol Hill to work as a Republican for a Democrat. But so I passed on that internship with John McCain, but was glad to be able to serve with him. And just one anecdote. John McCain, talk about somebody passionate about politics.
Feisty.
And feisty and... Did
he play tennis?
I'm glad he didn't.
So.
I don't think so. Yeah, probably.
But he, we had delegation meetings for years while I was in the House, and I broke up several fights between John McCain and some of my colleagues.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That is so funny.
But somehow I escaped, his wrath on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got to the Senate, the first vote I cast, it was on a Senate rules package, and I was on the other side of John on that, and he came over and just let me have it.
Really?
On my very first vote.
Really?
Just, put his finger in my chest and was going at it, and all of my colleagues around there were just laughing their head off.
They're like, welcome.
He's getting initiated. But I have to say, the next day, he was fine. Yeah. And we worked very closely together for years after that. And I was there at his home just the day before he died, and just treasured the memories and friendship that we have. And I have a lot of admiration for him and his widow, Cindy McCain, is now going to be ambassador to the World Food Program. We went through ambassador school together. Yeah. And so Cheryl and Cindy are very close as well.
Well, what is the balance, guys, between that passion, that feistiness? Like, John, what is the balance between having that passion, that feistiness, yet still being able to get things done? Cheryl, you've supported Jeff through his whole career, a lot of it in D.C. I know just even from my governor run, which was only a year and a half or a couple of years, it was not easy for Sally. It was not easy for me. It was not an easy contest. What is the balance between that? I'd love thoughts from both of you. And Cheryl, tell us about being the spouse to a public figure, a politician that's, being loved and being criticized constantly.
Well, I have to say I've grown thicker skin. First of all, we've been doing this for, 20 years now. And I just think, to try not to make people feel like they're evil if they disagree with you. And I think that's something that we all need to work on, especially this time right now. And they're going to have a difference of opinion. Yeah. And so I think we've realized, probably 50% of the people are going to be angry with you for a position that you take.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of had to learn that. And, I think it's even harder sometimes for the spouse to sit and watch it and be silent. And I really don't, I'm not on social media. So I've kind of kept it quiet.
Yeah.
But that's kind of part of the job.
And did you go off social media as like when politics happened, or did you just never get on?
I've never really been on.
Okay, you just never really got on.
Yeah,
but was part of that because you knew?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a conscious decision.
Jeff reads enough mean tweets and things to me that are said about him, and I think, okay, I'm kind of good not being in that.
Aren't some of those funny?
She's smart enough to put it aside. I'm shallow enough to not let it bother me that much. So
I also think it would take up so much of my time, and I think I would obsess over it. So I know myself pretty well.
You got to laugh about some of those mean tweets.
Oh, I do.
I had the governor on a couple weeks ago, and he sent out a tweet, and just look at the responses. You just either have to laugh or cry. You just laugh. It's just like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. No one's going to agree with anyone 100%. Yeah. It's not like we can't expect that. Even our own spouses obviously have differences and we don't always agree. There's no way that our whole constituent base is going to see things like we do all the time. Yet you're tasked as a politician, an elected official, Jeff, to get things done, to try to make progress. But that's been so hard to do the last long while. Like, what is the balance between getting things done and being feisty like Senator McCain and going overboard or not doing enough? I don't know. Give us your thoughts in this genre. It's really interesting.
Well, obviously, if you look at politics, national politics, any metric you want to use, we become far more polarized. If it's number of bills co-sponsored or the rate at which members vote across the aisle, we've really become far more tribal, and it's not been good.
It's dangerous.
It really is, and we've really experienced that just in the last couple of years. But I don't mind feistiness and people being passionate as long as you can forget that and come back the next day and negotiate. If you're in the legislature, if you are a legislator, compromise is the realm of the game. You've got to. That's what it's all about. Barry Goldwater, one of my heroes, is famous for his extremism and defense of there's no vice and all this. But he also said at one point, politics is nothing more than public business. Sometimes you make the best of a mixed bargain.
I like that. Yeah.
And so you realize that you're there. You express your values and your principles in your votes and in how you conduct yourself. But in the end, you never get everything you want. And I'm far more fond of Ronald Reagan's principle. If you get somebody agrees with me 80% of the time, he's still my friend. Yeah. And we've seen it far more polarized. And just one example of that, George W. Bush, when he became president, at the same time I got to Capitol Hill, and I voted on the other side of him on a number of issues. No Child Left Behind, or his prescription drug benefit, or Cuba policy. We're always battling with the White House on those things. But I was with him on tax policy, some of his foreign policy, trade policy, certainly. And immigration. And then when I ran for the Senate, he was out of office by that time. He came and did a fundraiser for me. Yeah. Not because I agreed with him, all the time, but I did some of the time.
Yeah.
And we always made it friendly. And so you don't see that as much today. And that's too bad.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. In fact, you guys were at our house. I hope it's okay if I say this. You were we did a fundraiser for Spencer after we lost out of the governor's race. We did a fundraiser for Spencer, and you guys were here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, I got a lot of heat from that. And it's like, I did my very best. Obviously, I thought that I was the best option to be the next governor, but the people disagreed. I lost. And I could either ostracize myself from the governor, or I could stay friends, even though I don't agree 100% with obviously what Spencer's doing or anyone's doing, or I could stay friends, try to exert some influence. Right. I ended up running the transition forum on the economy and stuff like that. But I think my point in that short story is...
I wanted to say that was so impressive when I found out, you had run and then you're helping him. That's amazing. And it takes a big
Cheryl.
person to do that. It really does.
I appreciate that. And that's not why I said it, but I really do appreciate it. But I guess I just think, isn't that the longer term better strategy and plan? You either exit and become enemies, or you try to influence where you can for good. I just don't.
Yeah.
But somehow we've lost that. It's sad.
Yeah, we mentioned John McCain, and one of our enduring memories for Cheryl and me was when he had lost the race to Barack Obama. He graciously, conceded defeat. But then the visual of that for me was we went to Capitol Hill for the inauguration of Barack Obama, and we were cutting through the Senate. It was a faster way to go. And there in the subway was John and Cindy McCain alone on the little subway between the Russell Building and the Capitol Building to go out, to the inaugural stage. And, just, weeks before, John McCain had, security all over, people following everywhere. And,
here he is alone.
And here he is alone. Yeah. And it must have been extremely difficult to walk out on that stage and see millions of adoring fans and to see his opponent sworn in.
Yeah.
And yet, that's what this country is all about.
Yeah.
You get over it, and you live to fight it another day and say, I'll come up with a better argument. I'll present it better. And so I've admired how you've handled this as well. And you have, everybody will come and talk to you.
Yeah.
that says something for you
I appreciate
about what you're doing.
Losing is lonely, right?
Yeah.
But that's that's why our kids play. That's why we play sports. That's why we do whatever. You learn to lose, you learn. It is lonely to lose, though. And it was, I didn't mean to talk this much about it, but it wasn't easy to lose the governor's race, right? And we had a lonely couple months after Sally and I just hunkered down, especially because it was in the midst of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended with COVID, which was just a bitter way to kind of go out. But anyways, you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and keep going. So you say, Jeff, you're not a career politician, which I appreciate, but you can't stay out of it. You're now going to be the ambassador to Turkey, Jeff. So the Flakes, are going to Turkey to be the ambassador from Snowflake, Arizona to Turkey. I love Turkey, by the way. I've only been there once, but it was so fun. I loved it. It was beautiful. The people were great. The food was cool. It was just a good place. This is, I don't know, though, 7 or 8 years ago. So why go again? Why are you answering the call, or what are your feelings about that? Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Turkey. They were in the news quite a bit, unfortunately, a year or two ago, whatever it was. But I haven't heard as much or a lot about Turkey recently. I'm sure that's not the case for you, but for the average listener, I assume that's the case.
Well, let's first let Cheryl talk about her experience in Turkey.
Well, a few decades ago, I was a BYU Young Ambassador.
Okay.
And it's a singing and dancing performing group. And this was 1985. And we did a 6-week tour to Egypt, Jordan, Greece, and Turkey.
I think you mentioned this to me once before. Yeah.
And
awesome.
I fell in love with Turkey. We spent about 10 days there, and I absolutely loved it. I grew up in Northern California.
Yeah.
And Istanbul looks like San Francisco, and it even has the bridge over the Bosphorus Strait.
Yeah.
And I loved cherry juice. And we went in May, so it was just a beautiful time. Another memory is Ephesus, where Paul preached.
Yeah.
And I have one of my favorite memories is performing in an ancient amphitheater, singing a cappella, 6-part, and it was so cool. It was just a great experience.
In Ephesus.
One
of the best, by the way, if you haven't been there, one of the best preserved Roman cities in the world. Mm-hmm. Ephesus, if you didn't know that. Yeah,
it's like you're in Greece too.
Spectacular, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember the people were extremely warm. And they love America there.
Well, so you were destined to be the ambassador to Turkey.
Yeah.
Who knew that?
She tells me she was a young ambassador. I'll be the old ambassador.
I got to be the young one.
Okay,
but I can tell you for 30-some years, in all the places we've traveled in the world, every capital we go to, she'll say, it's nice, but it's not Istanbul.
Istanbul is cool. So, I totally agree with you. Again, I was only there for 3 or 4 days, but it was unbelievable. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, a lot of those stacked buildings, the bridge across the Bosphorus, like you said. Yep, I agree. So, old ambassador, what are your thoughts to be the ambassador to Turkey?
No, it's definitely an honor and a privilege. When people over the years that I was in Congress would ask, if you weren't doing this, what would you like to do? I would always say, like to be in the Foreign Service. And I've had such an admiration for our diplomats abroad and what they do. People usually think when they think of American might and power, our military might, and it has been significant and has liberated many countries, sometimes many times. But our soft power, our diplomacy, transmitting American values abroad. Diplomacy is very different. It's much like we've been talking about how politics might be. I think Henry Kissinger described it once as the patient accumulation of partial successes.
I love that.
And so it's nothing sexy, but it makes a difference. And obviously Turkey is extremely important to the United States and to the world. It is literally the bridge between Europe and Asia, and right there in the Middle East. We have a difficult neighborhood. We have worked with Turkey closely on military issues. They've been a valued member of NATO. We've fought along their side, wars from the Korean War to Afghanistan. But there are some difficulties and recent challenges as well. And we want to make sure that Turkey remains anchored in the West.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is good for them. It's good for us.
That won't be an easy job, I don't think.
No, I know it won't. This is not a social post, I can tell you.
So, and you'll be there for an unspecified amount of time?
Yeah.
Or what? Tell us a little bit about, you just went through the hearings, and I know because you missed tennis for a while. You were back in D.C. But, tell us a little bit about the process. I just don't think people generally know. And then tell us a little bit about the job and how long you'll be there, things like that.
Okay. We have about 190 ambassadors to countries where we have a bilateral relationship. Some countries, like our colleague Tom Udall, will go to New Zealand. He'll also be the ambassador to Samoa.
Yeah,
so some are connected that way. We also have ambassadors to multilateral organizations like the United Nations or the European Union or NATO. And about 70% of the ambassadors out there are career Foreign Service officers. They join the Foreign Service maybe right after college and have worked there for 20 years and 25 years, 30 years, and then become ambassador.
And they can be ambassadors they can trade around and be ambassadors several different places.
That's right.
70%.
About 70%.
Okay.
Typically, that's what the ratio has been. And the other 30% are appointed by the president. All ambassadors serve at the pleasure of the president, even if they're career. And after every presidential election, every ambassador, career or otherwise, submits their resignation. And then the president will usually let the career Foreign Service officer stay, but the others come home. I'm a political appointee, and the career ambassadors go for 3 years, and ours, they would like us to be there 3 years as well. But the old custom was that a political ambassador would go for 2 years, then a president could appoint 2 to each country, more patronage, I guess, that way. Yeah. But the Senate confirmation process takes so long now, that's kind of thrown that out of whack. I was nominated in July. I didn't get my hearing until, October, and then was confirmed in late October. But I was pleased to, work with my former colleagues. I was on the other side of the dais.
Were you getting grilled? Is that how it is? I don't know what it's like. That is how it is. I would bet that no one's kind of watched, and is that what's it like? What are they saying? Do you have special interests in Turkey? Do you? I don't know.
I chaired the Africa subcommittee for years in the Senate, and was on that committee, and was on Foreign Relations Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. So I dealt with foreign policy generally, and I think I visited over the past 20 years about 80 countries, some of them multiple times. And so I've visited a lot of ambassadors and their posts and got country team briefings. It'll be interesting to be on the other side, being the ambassador to receive a congressional delegation. Yeah. But going through the Senate, it wasn't Bob Menendez is the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. He has very strong opinions and feelings and a passion for, the politics, in Europe and Asia and the Middle East and Greece and Turkey. And so he obviously, I met with him before and most of my colleagues before the hearing itself. But I was pleased. I think I got a little senatorial courtesy, and I was able to be confirmed by unanimous consent. So that was gratifying.
That's exciting. How do you feel about going to Turkey, Cheryl? Living there?
I'm really excited. Yeah. Really, it's
going back.
It's a great It's been a long time.
Will you be singing a cappella?
Well, probably not.
Okay,
a different role. But yeah, having been almost out of the Senate almost 3 years, and we've loved these last 3 years. COVID took a little detour for us, but we've had a great 3 years together, and I feel like we made up for lost time of 18 years where he commuted and we were apart a lot.
But now you're leaving your family again.
Yes,
they can come and visit though.
Yeah, our youngest 2 boys are at BYU, so everybody's on their own, and we do have 5 grandchildren. It's going to be hard to leave them too, but it's different than being like a mission president. Yeah. We can travel.
Yeah.
And
that's nice. It's almost more free in some ways. Yeah.
Right.
You have more freedom. Yeah.
I'm not going to be to be for 2 solid years straight. So that'll be better. But,
that will be fun. I'm sure they'll be excited to come see Grandma.
But we're excited to just, I think, overseas, we need some work done in relationships, and we're hoping to build those bridges back and remind our allies that they can trust us.
Cool. So tell us, I remember calling John. Called John in Moscow a couple of times when I was considering running for governor. I think twice. But literally, call Moscow, get some switch up. Is Ambassador Huntsman there? Or I might have said John. I can't remember because I feel like the lady was like, let me see if Ambassador Huntsman is planning on this or is available or whatever. Anyways, then it went, and then John comes on, hey, Jeff, but I got this, like, what does an ambassador do? I almost felt like he was in Russia, obviously, at the time. I almost felt like we had our conversations were a little flat in the sense that I didn't feel like there was a lot of sharing. I felt like he was like, hey, when I come back to the States, let's get together, Anyways, that's just kind of an inside funny story. And I think people listening will say, like, what do ambassadors do? An ambassador to the United Nations or an ambassador to Turkey? What do you really do? You host congressional delegations.
Sure.
What else?
Well, I mean, you are the representative of the U.S. government in that country. And you have a large, in the case of Turkey, a large staff there. It's a large embassy and consulate. Consular activity, involves taking care of Americans when they travel there, or if anybody in the Turkish population wants a visa to travel to the United States, we handle that as well. But when something happens that the head of state there in the host country doesn't like, from the U.S., then I get called in.
Call.
And so we will have a relationship, obviously, with the head of state, but the foreign ministry and other agencies. We have also many of the U.S. agencies, USAID, Department of Agriculture, trade folks at the USTR, and also we have a large NATO base in Turkey, Incirlik. And we have a lot of our Air Force there training and cooperating with Turkey. So it's a big mission, and it's a big job. Somebody called it being mayor of a small town, I guess, because the embassy community would take into
account. How big is it? Do you have employees that report to you, quote unquote? Like how big is it in Turkey?
There are more than 200 direct hire foreign service officers, and then you have locally employed Turks as well that work in the embassy, and all told, it's it surpasses 1,000 people.
Yeah,
so it's a large thing, and we live in the ambassador's residence in Turkey. It's an old stately residence on 10 acres, a former vineyard. And Cheryl was happy to find out that it's the only ambassador's residence in the world with both an indoor and an outdoor tennis court.
Oh, Cheryl, that's good. You'll be
come
playing.
Play tennis.
Yeah, I might be coming over to Turkey.
And a greenhouse and a beehive it even has. And, and so it's and we will do a lot of hosted receptions and whatnot. And Cheryl will be in charge of a lot of that.
Yeah, Cheryl, are you excited about that?
Yeah, it's a big job. I found out I do have a house staff of 6 to help me. Good. So It's kind of the best of both worlds. I get to help plan events, but I don't have to do all the work or the cleanup.
Yeah, you don't have to pull them off.
That's really great. So,
that's awesome. Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're going to love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
Let's talk a little bit, as much as you want to, about the current state of politics. Jeff, what was it like to be in D.C., the last 5 years or previous 5 years? Just give us, this is a broad, open-ended question about just the state of politics, what it was really like to be there, how you're feeling about things, just in general. It's a concerning time, I think, and people are concerned and have been concerned, rightly so. It's such a divisive time. I mean, this is really the big reason I'm doing the podcast, right? Yeah. I saw this division firsthand in our state, and I almost want to say, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute. We're, 99.7% of you are so good, whether you're Republican or Democrat or believe this or that. Let's come together. Let's build from common ground. It doesn't mean we give up our principles or what we believe in strongly, but let's come together. Anyways, this podcast is hopefully a small part of that. So that was my sense and feeling. And what state of current politics? What was it like to be in D.C.? Couldn't have been easy.
It hasn't been easy. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, really, ever since we got to the Senate, and being in the Senate is much different than being in the House. There's an old saying that in the House you run toward any camera you can find just to be noticed, and in the Senate you run away. And there's a lot of truth to that because every Senate race now determines who's in the majority, and so it's high stakes. And then we had just some just divisiveness that came in, and it didn't start with the former president. It started long before that. I think people on all sides have kind of exacerbated the situation, but it hasn't been easy. It comes at a cost, and there are death threats, and those were frequent, and still people serving time for threats made against our family. So it's been tough. I think just maybe one vignette that will kind of tell you what it's been like. During my time in the House, Gabby Giffords, my colleague from Arizona, was shot at a town hall kind of event that she was having. She recovered well enough a year later to come to Washington, but only to retire the next day. And she was still unable to stand on her own and to do some things. But she came to the State of the Union address, and I was friends with her, and I sat with her, and she wanted to stand when Barack Obama delivered his applause lines, like you always see in the State of the Union. Democrats will stand or sit down, and Republicans will stand with something they want. And anyway, but she couldn't stand on her own. And so I helped her up, and it left me standing among a sea of Democrats. And I immediately started getting dozens or hundreds of emails or texts, calls saying, "Why are you standing? Do you agree with this president?" And
isn't that scary?
It just really, I thought we've gone too far now. So that, and that was a few years ago. I think it's gotten worse since then. But let me just say, there are good people on both sides of the aisle trying to do the right thing. And these are tough times, and we often, think of politics just in terms of national politics. But boy, this COVID period has been tough on school board members, members of the city council, or mayors, or county commissioners, or others that are trying to do the right thing, given the information they have, and usually get just grief. And so that's the one thing I try to make a point of doing. When somebody is doing things that uplift the debate or try to uplift the tone, to shoot them a note, or to the extent you use social media, use it in ways that uplifts people. And podcasts like this, I think, do that.
Yeah. How do we get good people to run? I mean, that's
difficult.
what's scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that no one will step out into this craziness.
Well, and you have to be, it is a family affair. Yeah. And it wasn't just Jeff running for 18 years. No. It was our entire family. And there were some great experiences that I wouldn't have traded for the world. But there were some scary ones, some difficult ones. We gave up a lot of things family-wise.
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand. You spoke about death threats. That's what happens when you run for politics. I mean, that is just, like you said, going too far. It's going too far. And we should all look at ourselves in the mirror and saying, how are we either adding to this or how are we hopefully trying to make it better? Because these are real people just doing their best. They're flawed. They're imperfect, but man, they had courage to step out there because it's not easy to step out. What's interesting, because I stepped out and ran for governor, I now get asked to do everything, right? But the reason is
for punishment.
Exactly because I was stupid enough, quote unquote, to step out. Now people think I'll do everything, and now I'm a little more wise, right? And I'm biting and I'm saying, no, thank you, no, thank you. How can I help? How can I help from the sideline? But I will say too, in all sincerity, Sally and I aren't anxious to step back into that fire, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how could you be? So that's hurtful when you don't have, I fear that we don't have the best of the best running for office, largely because of how ugly it's gotten.
Mm-hmm. It is a deterrent. And not just those who offer themselves up to run, but I'm often asked by college students, how do I get involved? Where do I start?
Yeah.
And I've always, used to say, well, just hop on a congressional campaign and help out there. And I'm more reluctant to offer that advice now. I usually say, well, start, maybe with a city council race or somewhere because it's less likely to be so partisan. Because it's tough to even be involved on the staff level of some of these campaigns without, using social media to promote your guy or your gal in a way that labels you afterwards. And I can tell you that's a real issue with social media. In particular, going through this confirmation process has really brought that to the fore. I mean, as soon as, I was named, or before I was named officially, State Department wanted to know everything I've ever said, everything I've ever, any speech I've ever given, anything I've ever tweeted. Because, have I said things about my colleagues, former colleagues, that have to now, through advise and consent, confirm me. Yeah. And that, that's a lot of self-reflection. What did I say? Did I get in an overheated debate and say something that I wish I wouldn't have said? And, there was an experience, one of the people that President Biden named to his cabinet or nominated for his cabinet had said some things about certain senators that, in the end, caused her to withdraw her nomination.
Yeah.
And she had said things about me. I was there, but I actually wrote to my former colleagues and said, don't let that define her. She's passionate on this. I'm sure she wished she hadn't said it, but sometimes that's not enough. So that is one caution I always give to the extent, and we need more people, not just to offer themselves for elected office, but people to work on a staff or a campaign or to advocate on an issue out in the public sphere. But just please do it in ways that uplift the debate and don't get caught in the vitriol of name calling, because it's not good for the country and it's not good for you in the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's scary. This is kind of a hard question, but any thoughts on the cancel culture that we're seeing? I mean, because I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah. It's scary to stand for anything because anything you stand for could be criticized or whatever. And again, of course, there are bad actors out there. And those bad actors need to be taken down, taken out, but those are few and far between. Really, a lot more people are just doing their very best. They're imperfect, like we all are. But this cancel culture is so scary and can be so damning and defining. Yeah. And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it worries me. It's gone too far. And like I said, in this case, somebody that I thought, this person is qualified, got carried away. but don't let that define them or their career. But by the same token, you need to, you can have strong opinions. You can express them. You can change your mind later. Every good politician does.
Everyone grows, right? Everyone learns.
Yes, exactly.
You're not allowed, Cheryl, to keep growing and learning, are you?
Yikes.
But
I'm saying in the public sphere.
Yeah.
Right.
But that is you can explain later on what is tougher to deal with or walk back is if you engage in name calling or vitriol or treat the other side as if they're evil.
Yeah.
Somehow. That's what gets you in trouble. And I think cancel culture has certainly gone too far. But to the extent that we can serve as examples to try to turn down the volume, we ought to.
Yeah. I love the Reagan quote that you shared, about when we agree 80% of the time, I consider that a friend. I mean, I might append to that. I don't know why if we don't even agree 50% of the time, we still can't be friends. Yeah. That doesn't mean we might not work together on the same issues going the same way. But I guess we can still be friends, but disagree, right? I'm sure you have great examples of friends on both sides of the aisle that, you're friends with them because they're human first. Our common humanity binds us together more than any, gender, religious affiliation, or political party,
Well, sure. Just one example. One senator that I got along with well, Martin Heinrich. He's a senator from New Mexico, senior senator. We were in the House together, got elected to the Senate at the same time. He's a liberal Democrat. I'm a conservative Republican. We didn't vote together on much, some public lands issues and things we did together. But we decided to show how Republicans and Democrats can get along, no matter if they disagree. And so we marooned ourselves on a deserted island.
How was that?
In August of 2014, and survived together with just really a machete between us, which might be a little dangerous. But Discovery Channel actually came along and filmed it. You can still get it on Amazon for $2.99. Shameless plug there. No, but we did it to make a point that we can work together, and we had a good time. When we got back, Stephen Colbert ran a clip of us spearing fish or whatever and said, Flake and Heinrich proved once and for all Republicans and Democrats can get along when death is the only option.
That's kind of what it takes, right?
Yeah, but we've proven that empirically. It can be done.
Well, let me ask you one more political question before we move on from this. Steve Scalise was at our house a couple months ago. He is the Republican, correct me if I'm, majority whip, is that the right?
Yes.
And that means that he kind of whips the vote, right? Meaning he gathers or gets a feel for everyone, where everyone is in Congress. And he's whatever, the second or third most ranking Republican in the country right now. He was over here for an event with Sally and I. And by the way, for listeners, he was the congressman that was shot in the baseball practice. And Jeff, you were there. He shared that story in our house with several friends and colleagues, and it was moving and it was scary, touching. Do you mind, just because he was just here and I heard the story from him, do you mind, I don't know, telling us a little bit about that or commenting on that? Most people will have heard of that. Yeah,
well, that was obviously the darkest day. Cheryl happened to be in Washington. This was the day before the game. I loved playing in the congressional baseball game. It's baseball, by the way, not softball.
It's fun. It's real fast pitch baseball.
It's Republicans against Democrats, but it's very much a bipartisan affair. And we raised a lot of money for charities, and it's a great feel-good event, typically. This is the day before the game, and so we were at practice in Northern Virginia, just outside of the district, the Republicans, and we were wrapping it up. I had already taken batting practice. I was just standing on basically the line between home plate and first base. Steve Scalise was playing second base, and then we heard just a crack of. It sounded like it wasn't the crack of a bat or a lawnmower misfiring. It sounded to me like a gun, but it was just so out of place that we didn't think much of it. And then just kind of looked at each other. What was that? And then just a few seconds later, there was a volley of gunfire, and our third baseman just yelled, "Shooter, shooter!" And he was behind the third base dugout and opened fire. And ultimately emptied about 100 rounds.
100 rounds
on the field. And he hit Steve pretty quickly. Steve went down and then did kind of a military crawl from second base out into between second and first into the outfield. And I remember looking at the trail of blood that he left as he crawled trying to get away from the shooter. Shooter was outside of the fence, and he moved around. As soon as the yelled shooter, I turned to the dugout, and this, of all things that morning, this memory sticks with me more than anything. It was like time was suspended for a second, and I just turned and started running to the dugouts and watched as bullets pitched off of the gravel in front of me. And I thought, why us? How could anybody look at a bunch of middle-aged men trying to play baseball and see the enemy? And I just remember that thought. And I went and dove in the dugout, and several of my colleagues did as well. And one of the staffers kind of fell in the dugout with a leg wound. He'd been shot in the leg. And we, as we're down below the cinder block to try to avoid the bullets that were going over our heads, we fashioned a tourniquet and put it on his leg. And I poked my head up every once in a while just to see, where he was. And there was gunfire now coming from Capitol policemen from behind our dugout at the shooter, and it was just deafeningly loud.
Yeah.
And it was about 8 minutes of pure terror.
8 minutes?
8 minutes.
It's a long time.
That is a long time.
The gunman worked his way around the backstop and was coming toward the dugout. Obviously, we would have been all sitting ducks in there. We couldn't go anywhere. And I poked my head up to see him, and he saw me right near the end there. And I jumped down, and right at this time, one of the Capitol policemen, who was shot himself or wounded, worked his way up to the gunman and killed him. And then somebody yelled, shoot her down, shoot her down. And so I jumped up and ran out to Steve.
Yeah, he told us about this. Yeah.
And used my batting glove to plug his hip, where I was, I could tell that was the entry wound. It was bleeding quite a bit. And I kind of rocked him to see if I could see the exit wound, and there wasn't one. The bullet just went in and ricocheted all over. And it was a tough time. And Brad Winstrip ran out. Gratefully, he was a former Army medic, and he had more training than I did there. But we kind of fashioned a tourniquet that kept him from bleeding out. But it was a tough thing. And then one of the staffers handed me Steve's phone after he was secured, and the first responders got there, and said, "Would you call his wife?" And I did, and she answered the phone, and it was a call from Steve's phone, and so she, answered it, "Hi, baby."
Yeah.
And I just, oh man, to have to tell her, "Hey, your husband is okay, but here's what's happened." And at that time, we didn't think he would make it. So it was really nip and tuck for a while. But that was a tough call to make.
That was. So touching is to hear Steve tell it, that you were the first or one of the first on the scene to try to help him. He remembers seeing your face. And like you said, why would anyone, the senseless violence that we see, and to hear his wife, "Hi, baby," like that puts it in perspective. Cheryl, when did you first hear about that? And did you know Jeff was there? And, how does that affect your world?
Well, as Jeff said, we always lived in Arizona. So I would go out and visit occasionally. And I always went to the congressional baseball games, super fun. And so I had flown in the day before, and we were in a hotel, and he called me. It was about 7:25 in the morning. I remember it. And he just said, "I can't talk. Turn on the TV. There's been a shooting, but I'm okay." And that's all he told me. And so you can imagine the fear. And so I'm turning on the TV, and then it started reporting. And I literally watched him live speaking to the reporters about it. And you could just see the anguish on all of their faces and the concern for Steve and the others that were shot. And we felt really blessed that day that it was contained. Yeah, the Capitol policeman who shot him, who had been injured himself, had he not taken him out, they literally would have been shot, all of them. Because they were in like a pen. They were in a baseball diamond that had fences around it. And so they were truly trapped in there. And if that brave Capitol policeman hadn't been able to shoot him. And that was another blessing, too, was that Steve Scalise was there. And because he was in House leadership, he had security. That's why the Capitol policemen were there. Otherwise, they would not have been there. And so the fact that Steve was at that practice that day literally saved their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we turn this around a little bit? That's a trying subject and a sad subject. I was inspired as Steve told that story at our house. And I think it's important to make, these are people on the other side of your tweet. These are people with real lives, and they don't claim to be perfect. You know, whether you think Steve's politics but he's a good guy. He was here, he was with my family. He's trying to cheer people up. He's supporting Utah. He's trying to support his party for what he believes in, and he still, by the way, he still walks with a limp, right? Yeah. He still hasn't, he's still audible. That will affect the rest of his life. That has changed his life. Like Gabby, of course, even more,
Well, we've got to do better. It starts with leadership. It starts with, in our own lives, and to the extent we have control of our own actions, we've got to model better behavior. And if we can all do that, it spreads. It really does. And on that day, the Democrats were practicing, a few miles away. And obviously somebody called and let them know what was going on. And all of them went to the pitcher's mound where they were and dropped down in prayer for their Republican colleagues. And, I won't forget that either.
Yeah.
But we've got to go from, coming together in times of crisis, whether it's 9/11 or something like this, and having that last more than a week.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, we've got to, in our own sphere of influence, model better behavior. And like I said, to the extent we can, encourage those politicians who see it this way and who reach across the aisle and don't treat their opponents as enemies. Give them an attaboy every once in a while. Because I can tell you, as a former elected official, there is very little political currency in reaching across the aisle. I used to, when I was, in the House, when I'd run for re-election, I would point out in campaign brochures, I've worked with this Democrat on this issue, and here's what we've done.
Yeah.
That used to get me
That used to be applauded.
Yeah. That used to get me plaudits. Later, it would get me a primary.
Yeah.
and that's the difference. There has to be a political value. And I can tell you, when you, as a politician, when you see a tweet, or if you get an email for somebody just saying, I just want you to know how much I appreciate, you doing this or that, or I know this must be difficult, but, those, you cling on to those and it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And like I said, as soon as there's more value to that, more currency for that, then politicians will act differently. So it's not just if you're in office, but if you're supporting candidates or if you're just in the general public out there, you can make a difference.
Yeah, I love that thought. Let me just ask two more questions and we'll wrap up. The last question, by the way, I want to talk about the future and your hope for the future. But before that, obviously, you've gone on to do some media, right? CBS, sorry, I don't watch the news. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And CNN.
And CNN and CBS. What have you learned doing that? And what role does the media have to play in kind of all this? You know what I mean? Give me your, again, perspective from experience of being an elected official to now being on CBS and CNN. What is the role of media? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, I first went with CBS because they offered me a position to do a program called Common Ground, where I went out and actually looked for examples of people coming together. And so that was a great experience. I think people just have to recognize media particularly the cable media, but really the network as well, they can appeal to a very small segment of society and rile them up and have them loyal consumers of what they put out. And that can be a profitable business for them, just appealing to a very small segment.
Yeah.
And that's the trouble. Yeah, it is. And that as long as that is the case, and I think it will be in a free market, then we just have to recognize that. But it's as a consumer of that information, my advice to people our age is change the channel.
Yeah, that's why I don't watch news, right? I'm sorry. And this is bad, but before running for governor, while running for governor, it's funny. I have no remnants that I ran for governor. I have a couple of campaign signs, but I don't have any of the media interview because we didn't watch it. We didn't, and we just don't watch it. But then you lose out on being informed. So there's a balance, right?
There is, but
it's hard to find something that's in the middle that really doesn't have its slant, and that's a challenge for everybody.
Yeah. For people younger than us, it's get out of your news feed. Don't just assume that everything that's fed to you because of
gives you the full picture.
Yeah, it gives you the full picture. And boy, people today, and I talking to college students, and we've done a lot of that lately. I would have given a lot to be able to wake up in the morning and have access to all the information that we today have access to. If I had had that in college, I wouldn't have had to go to the library as much and go through microfiche. But that that's a great thing. But you have to recognize you need to read, and I emphasize read broadly.
Yeah.
There are still a lot of publications out there that may lean left or right, but they still fact check.
Yeah.
And if you can recognize the difference between news and opinion, and
it's hard to do.
Reading broadly will allow you to do that. And that's what we need. And a lot of people do that. I wish more of us would.
Yeah. I often ask my guests about some of the challenges that they've faced. And I really appreciate you guys being vulnerable and sharing about it's not easy to be an elected family. It's not easy. Oh, yeah. I could tell stories about that. Like right now, Sally and I learned very quickly that it is not easy to even be running for office. So I appreciate you guys sharing those stories. We had a kind of a small window here after you were nominated, or what's the right word? After you were confirmed. Sorry. Yes. After the stamp of confirmation happened and before you leave for Turkey. But Sally and I will be praying for you and wishing you guys the very best. But give us hope for the future, Cheryl. Jeff, good. Close us out here with anything that we haven't covered, or just some, we've talked about some serious things today. And we have because it's important, I think. And but there is hope over all this, right? There is hope. Give us some hope and give us some parting thoughts before you head for Turkey.
Well, I feel like, we still live in the greatest country in the world, and everybody wants to come.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that it is a chosen land, and we've got a great constitution in spite of people and some that, aren't following it directly. But we've got a great country, and I think we're excited to go overseas because we represent the entire United States. It's not a party thing.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Partisanship needs to end at the water's edge for sure. And we feel that. And yes, we were appointed by Joe Biden, but we're Republicans. And I think that's a cool thing to show that he reached across the aisle and wants Jeff there in a very consequential position right now. Turkey there's a lot going on there. And we feel really honored and hope that we can, do our best.
Oh, I think you'll do us proud. That's for sure. And that's a good point about President Biden, reaching across the aisle. That's great.
John Meacham, the historian, has a great book out a couple of years ago, The Soul of America. Mm-hmm. And it's a great read, especially in these times when what he does is details what this country has been through. And when you look at what we've been through, a civil war, a revolutionary war to begin with, a civil war and women's suffrage and the civil rights movement, and we've had really significant challenges. We're still not a perfect union. But we're headed that direction. We're always improving, and we have severe challenges now, but nothing that we can't deal with if we recognize we're all Americans and we can work through it.
I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for taking some time today. Godspeed in Turkey. And keep that tennis court warm.
Oh, absolutely.
We might be there sometime.
Please do.
Jeff and Cheryl Flake, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Hey, guys. I was really moved by that episode to hear the personal stories of Jeff, having gunfire around his head and seeing, Steve Scalise, his co-worker and congressman on the ground, bleeding out. Steve shared that story with us at our house, and it was just heart-wrenching. At some point, we've gone too far. I am all for principles. I'm a principle-based person. But again, our common humanity is what guides us. I don't agree with Senator Flake on everything politically. Before I get hate mail and whatever, I'm not saying I don't agree with Governor Cox on everything. I'm not saying that, but I do like them. I do think they're good people. I do think they're trying their best. I do think that we're common travelers here on Earth. And the point of the Extraordinary Us podcast is to share stories, hopefully from all different types of people. I mean, we had Jason Chaffetz on here. He's very different than these guys. And I like Jason. But to share stories of people that come from different perspectives. But again, no matter our differences, we all are much more alike than we are different. I appreciate Jeff and Cheryl Flake. I think they'll do a great job representing America in Turkey. That is a great part of the world, by the way. It's a beautiful part of the world and a great part of it. I wish them only the best there. I'm confident they'll do a great job. And I loved our conversation. I love playing tennis with Jeff. I'm a competitor. So is he. He gets aggressive at the net and swings hard, and it's fun. So no matter our differences, people, we're all a lot more alike. Let's give each other the benefit of the doubt. Let's exercise compassion. I love the book that Jeff brought up, The Soul of America. And I love this quote. I can't remember who he said it by, but the patient accumulation of partial successes. Isn't that true in all our lives? We are patiently, because it takes time, and sometimes we're not winning, quote unquote. We're losing. We all lose. We talked about losing in this episode and how lonely it is to lose sometimes, but the patient accumulation of partial successes. I think he said that's diplomacy. That's kind of life, guys. Let's be patient with each other. Let's be kind to each other. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. I appreciate your love and support. This is the Extraordinary Us podcast. And again, thanking my friends, Jeff and Cheryl Flake, for spending time today. And I hope that you were touched. I hope that you'll listen to those stories, that some of those stories that Jeff shared. He's been in the room where it happens. He's been there. And those are heartbreaking stories. We can all do a little better. Let's make tomorrow a better day. Appreciate and love you all. Thanks for listening. Please share with a friend that would benefit from this episode.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Us Podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing at your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for your support and love for the Extraordinary Us podcast. We just got news that we are in the top 2% of podcasts in all the world. So please keep loving and listening and share with a friend. But also, there's another podcast that Sally and I are doing together.
There is. It's called Under Our Bed, and you've heard about it.
You've heard the promos.
You've heard it, and guess what?
It's actually out now.
Here.
You can actually find it.
You can really listen to it now.
It wasn't like a fake tease and then pulled away. It's really there.
It's a real podcast.
It is a real podcast. Sorry, guys. It took us a little bit longer to get it published. We're not great at this, but Under Our Bed is here.
You're going to love it.
Just so sure of that.
I'm just so confident.
Episode 1, we talk about why the name and explain the name. Episode 2, we talk about
Doing the unexpected.
the joy of doing the unexpected. In upcoming episodes, you'll hear more exciting topics. So tune in and subscribe now. Good night, Sal.
Good night.